Hi everyone, welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint.
And I'm Julian Taylor.
And welcome to our podcast.
Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in to part 2 of this special podcast where we spoke with Ed Clancy, former professional cyclist. And in part 1, we had some really interesting discussions. We talked about how many Olympic gold medals that he'd won. And it was only a measly 3, by the way. We also talked about some interesting facts and things that had happened in his life, like sharing a house with 2 other cycling superstars, Mark Cavendish and Geraint Thomas. So welcome to part 2. And in this part, we talked to Ed and grilled Ed about performance management and how performance management was so important to achieving optimal performance. And we started to relate and think about that and how we could relate it back to our world of safety. So all you need to do now is sit back, you need to relax and listen, and that's your next half hour of your life taken care of. Thank you very much.
That point, because I think that is a massive point, isn't it, Langdon, is actually how do you get an organisation to change? Yeah. And I'm interested, how did Brailsford, sorry, I call him Mr. Brailsford, Sir David Brailsford, because he's one of my heroes, because I love what he's done in different teams.
Yeah.
How did he come into British cycling? How did he sell that to the team and to the athletes?
Well, I guess
Didn't miss that day.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. For a start, I think, but when you look at Dave and who he was and what he looked like in that organisation at this point in time, I always saw, back in 2008, I always saw Dave as not old, but he was a senior figure. Yeah. But when I look at him now, I'm like, that guy probably wasn't much older than I am today. Yeah. And to be the performance director of the Great Britain cycling team, and to be fair, at that point in time, he wasn't Sir David Brailsford, he was just Dave. Yeah. That's what we called him. He didn't have a massive history of success or, he's credible, but he didn't have a massive history of credibility or experience or anything like that behind him. Yeah. But he did have that willingness to learn, and it was almost infectious. And, if you look at the things that he brought in, he even, there's a fella called Professor Steve Peters who worked with us. Yeah. It sounds pretty run-of-the-mill these days, but I don't think there was many sports teams around that, would lean on a sports psychologist as heavily as the Great Britain cycling programme did at that point in time. I think he was a big part of encouraging everyone to sort of, look in the mirror, as Shane Sutton would sort of say. So Dave, he didn't let an ego get in the way of, us making small changes. He brought in Steve Peters, things like that. I mean, Dave himself, actually, I didn't know this at the time, but I've met, there's a fella that was, used to work in DHL, was like quite a senior fella, called Guy, that worked quite senior in DHL, and Dave Brailsford, I know now, that sort of lean on him for a little bit of mentoring, in sort of the business world and the politics and things like that. And again, it's just having that willingness to learn.
And look outside of your own discipline and sport and look elsewhere for it.
I don't know if I've answered your question. Your question was more along the lines of how did that spread across the entire organisation?
Because bringing marginal gains in for the first time must have been a bit of a cultural change.
Yeah. Was there pushback to that change in philosophy? To me, that's one of the. I feel like that's an avenue to think, because now we hit, and I got to think it was the same way for you then, most likely, because you were at that age when 20 years old, let's just say. There's that whole younger versus older. There's a way that they each learn differently. And the way I do things versus, I'm 37, there's a way I do things versus what an 18-year-old or whatever now that's, it's not the same. And likewise a 60, Yeah,
100%. I can't get my head around social media either, but I think that the point is, like, I don't know. In terms of, like, why were we all on this way? Was there any resistance? Not really, because, like, the way I saw it, the way I felt at the time is probably a better way of saying it. The way I felt at the time, in the early days, pre-2008 and pre-2012, is that we were all bonded by this united goal and this united dream of like taking the world on and winning everything. You know, I felt that everyone was sort of like in it together, and this was before things really blew up. And again, I touched earlier on like the difficulties of dealing with success in an organization. You know, I do feel like there was probably a point in time where it was everyone had a value, everyone had a worth, and it's almost like people start looking over the shoulder within the organization saying like, well, why is that person's brand bigger than mine? Or, you know, why is it that person's doing that job and I haven't been promoted to that? And that was difficult. But back in those days, you know, it was almost that we were all united by the fact that we were like the up and comers. Like, you know, we were going to take on the established cycling nations of Australia and mainland Europe. And to be fair to Dave, this is probably the best answers I can give you. How did we do it? How did we get everyone on the same page? How did we not have any resistance into the new philosophies and psychology and things like that? I think the short answer is we were united by a common goal. Like a big pack of husky dogs, all pulling against the weight, all pulling in the same direction. That's all we needed to know.
So actually, again, it ties into what we talk about. I mean, it's a subtle link, but we talk about, rather than talking about safety as a separate thing, make safety part of the organisational goal.
Yeah.
Make safety a part of your organisational focus.
Yeah.
So actually, you're not talking about it as, oh, we need to do this. This is what we're trying to do. Yeah. Oh, and if we can, we'll do it in a safe way. We talk about it as one thing. I'm kind of flitting to and fro because I'm just really interested to talk to you as well, Ed, and hear some of the stuff that you've got to say. One point, you shared a house with two of my other heroes. So have you ever heard of a guy called, and you're going to have to tell me, how do you say Geraint? Is it?
Oh, Geraint.
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 Geraint Thomas, okay, who's won the race.
Yeah.
So you know what the race is, don't you, Langdon?
Talking about Tour de France.
There's only one cycle, the Tour de France. Okay.
Yeah. I know Lance.
Okay. And you've also, okay. We all know Lance. Yeah. Okay. My neighbour told me a very bad joke about Lance, which I'm not going to repeat on the pod. He told it me this morning. So
go on, Jules.
Well, he was basically saying, I've got all the time in the world for Lance. He said he won all those races. He said, when I was on drugs, I couldn't even find my bike, which I thought was a pretty, yeah.
You know what? Yeah. But that brings up a good point.
Okay. But the other guy was...
I'm not going to go there, but that brings up a good point.
was, and if you meet my missus, all she'll talk about is Cav. She loves Cav. So you got a house with 3 future stars. Did you realise at the time, because you were pretty young kids then, weren't you really?
Yeah. Did we realise at the time that...
the potential, did you realise what could happen?
It depends who you ask, probably. If you ask, Cav always believed in himself.
Right, yeah.
Like, he didn't really... By all rights, he had no reason to. Like, you know, he wasn't... he'll tell you this himself. He was never the most athletically gifted, athlete. He never even made the talent team criteria that I mentioned earlier. You could definitely race a bike. He had good tactical awareness. He was determined, very driven. Maybe if you asked him, when he was 18 years old, living with me and Geraint and the boys in Manchester, whether he was going to be the best sprinter of all time, I reckon he'd have said, yeah, he always believed in himself. And it's interesting, isn't it? There's this idea that, winners always believe in themselves and things like that. Yeah. In my experience, they don't always. And I think a lot of them are sort of driven by the, insecurities or the self-doubts to some extent. But Cav always believed in himself. Cav, he'd always told you he was going to be the best sprinter in the world. And funnily enough, he was right,
Because just for those people who are listening who don't know, he levelled 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago?
Stage wins with
Eddie Merckx, who was kind of the all-time great.
Yeah, interesting time for Cav right now. I think everyone's waiting to see
will he go again?
Yeah, who he signs for next year in terms of his team, and can he do it again, and can he get
one more?
Yeah. I'm a massive fan of Cav. He really is a great guy, just so passionate, and when he wins, you see the emotion pouring out of him. When he gets angry, you see the emotion pouring out of him, and Yeah, he is the best thing about cycling in many ways. Geraint, I guess he was more methodical. Like, he was a bit more subdued and thoughtful. But again, like, just it's almost like something wrong with him. He'd never quit. He'd never throw the towel in. It didn't matter how tired he was or how much it was raining.
Or which bone he'd broken.
Yeah, man, just like riding the Tour de France with broken hips and things like that. Just like it was part and parcel of, yeah.
He's my hero because I do have a reputation for falling off bikes, and so does Geraint Thomas. He was pretty good at falling off at one point. So,
yeah, I'd let you tell him that.
Yeah, but he got back on and rode again. That was the difference.
Hard as nails, isn't he? And he still is. I said this to him this year. A few months back, he got third in the Tour de France at 36 years old, after almost everyone, externally and internally, writ him off, to some extent. Yeah. And it's not going to be not necessarily a standout result. It's not the thing that people are going to remember him for. But I think that's his biggest achievement, that podium in the Tour.
Spectacular.
The young kids have come up, Pogacar and all that, are just they're potentially bringing things to the sport that nobody's ever seen. Yeah, I think for G to he's just a warrior, isn't he? Yeah, to battle on and get that result, not out of the blue, but against the odds. Yeah, fair play to him. Yeah.
G is a lot easier to pronounce, I do have to say.
Yeah.
Cool. Just we've talked about marginal gains, but can you confirm one thing for me? Because I'm a man who likes his sleep.
Yeah.
Was part of marginal gains down to that kind of detail that when you went away and stayed in a hotel, you take your own mattress and pillows?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, Team Sky really sort of popularised that idea of taking mattresses and pillows and all that round, and of course they had the money and resources to do so, and they did, and as far as I know, they still do, and other teams do it as well. And they even hear stories of some of the World Tour teams will go around, and obviously in different hotels all the time, and they take their own chef there, and they'll have someone that replaces the filter and the air conditioning units in the hotel if they have to make sure it's fresh for the riders and things like that, so don't get any dust particles and things when they sleep in. But on the topic of sleep, it's interesting. There's masses of evidence to suggest that sleep's not just beneficial for athletes, but people like yourselves, business people. And so it's sort of this idea that getting 8.5, 9 hours of sleep is demonized as being lazy, or it's the total opposite. If you look at the health benefits of having consistent sleep in a good environment, massive. There's a fellow called Matthew Walker that's he's done a few podcasts. He's a sleep expert. He's got a book that I've read. It's fascinating. How many just unbelievable stats there are about how useful good sleep is. And funnily enough, I mean, before I'd heard of Matthew Walker and read his books and everything, the one thing I'd always try and prioritize above everything else is sleep. I just knew that I couldn't ride a bike. I couldn't reply to an email. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't control my temper if I hadn't slept. And I think that's a marginal gain that really anyone can apply here.
And again, there's a direct relation there, isn't there, to safety as well, Langdon?
Yeah.
Well, and I think, so I was never, we kind of hit on, I was never a professional athlete. Long ways from it. Let's keep that separate.
He tried to kid us on him that he was a serious golfer, but
No. Played college golf and unfortunately chose not to pursue it. In retrospect, maybe I wish I had, but it is what it is at this point. I'll have the senior tour I'll look forward to. But I wonder what, and I think we apply it here all the time, and that is, and we've kind of hit on a little bit, that value of understanding what you're wanting to do. And Jules was just, I don't know if he was alluding to it, but I took it as this. So that off the job, on the job correlation of health and safety and importance. So what I'm getting at is you understood that when you were in training, what you were doing, that was your on-the-job preparation for the competition, correct? Which would be your on-the-job.
Yep.
You understood that off the job. So when it wasn't necessarily your rigorous training, there's a correlation to what you did during that time. What would that do to your on the job? And I think that's something we also try to really build up better, is that mindset of what I do at home is my business.
Yeah.
What I do at work, that's work's business. But honestly, Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, it doesn't matter who it is. Everything that they do, it's for that on the job, because there is an understanding that if I get hurt at home, I'm not going to be able to perform on the job. Likewise, if I get hurt on the job, that's going to have an adverse effect at home.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that kind of that correlation? And there is a little difference, right? Because you reached a pinnacle that most don't. I mean, and that's, so I think there is a little mindset difference realistically for any professional athlete versus everyone else. But what are your thoughts when you're talking? How do you try to portray that to others, to, anyone, typical layperson, us, or whatever it is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So, athletes, when the most elite track cycling athlete, or even the Tour de France greats, a big week, for their actual on-bike training, it might be 30, might be 35 hours. If they're really going for a big week on the road bikes, a huge week. It's almost like a part-time job. So what I'm saying is they're never really off the job. Like every time you eat something, every time you sleep, when you get up, the interactions you have, how you conduct yourself around, people in airports, and you're never off the job, So yeah, in terms of that, there's the life of an elite sports person. For me, that was the hardest thing about it. You're never off the job. That was part and parcel of being a pro athlete. But in terms of safety in particular, of course, we'd compete really, and it really mattered under the lights for 4 minutes once every 4 years. I had to condense 4 years of hard work and sacrifice and dedication and suffering and try and get it right in 4 minutes once every 4 years. So everything else around it, if we had a poorly maintained bike for our 1 hour training ride the day before and the chain snapped when you're doing a little 5-second sprint, you've got the potential there to wipe out your entire cycle of work, if that makes sense, In terms of safety, we always wore helmets, when we're out on the road in Portugal doing the training camp, we'd always try and have a flashing rear light on us and things like that. Again, it's sort of like a marginal gain in a completely different context, but I'd be lying if I said safety was always at the forefront of our minds when we were training, but it was definitely there. And we knew that every time we had a stupid crash in training, that affected what we were going to do on the big day. Every time we had a mechanical failure that led to a little injury or illness or whatever, illness, probably even better example, food hygiene. Every time we took our eye off the ball and lost a week of training with food poisoning, that's going to cost us on the big day.
And I think, maybe but everything you're saying really paints that picture of, a lot of times we don't realize the adverse effects that come from something. Like if it could be something as minor as if I get sick at home, because of an extenuating circumstances, not even work related. What does that do to the workplace then if I either one, go to work sick and affect or infect, 10 other people? Yeah. So then you have a couple of lines out. Or let's say I stay home, I'm not able to work. Then I have to use a day when that could be less than, what I mean? There's a number of things. Yeah. It is that mindset of you're always, whether you're on or off the job, you're kind of always on the job. And I don't mean that you need to have time away for sure. Yeah. But there is that direct correlation. And something you said was everything you were doing was for that 4 minutes. So even when you were off the job, you understood how that directly correlated to that 4 minutes on the job. But, and that's something I think I know especially as in America, I think we can struggle with pretty often. It's that mindset of, it's my business.
Well, I think
it doesn't matter because it's not going to affect me at work. When honestly, if I, and I don't mean bad, but if I go out and I smoke 10 packs once I get out of work, or if I'm getting drunk, at night.
Does it all the time, by the way.
What does that honestly do to the work?
Yeah.
Well, I know, but what?
Yeah.
But honestly, what could that do to the workplace? I mean, and there's.
I think the thing that really resonated though was the sleep piece. I think even if you're somebody working on a construction site going up a scaffold and you're working at height, actually, if you're having arguments with your missus and you're not sleeping well, actually, how does that then affect your performance, your judgment? Once you do get into the workplace, it's absolutely correlated.
Hey, I don't want to misquote anybody else, but if anyone's half interested in sleep, I'll check out the Matthew Walker fella.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable stats. And like I said, I'm not going to try and misquote him, but it depends on how sleep deprived you are. Yeah. But it seems to be almost as bad as drunk driving in some circumstances, you know?
Yeah.
You're right. There's research, especially in healthcare, that has showed the same thing from a nursing perspective.
In terms of road,
you're right.
Road accidents, massive issue. And in terms of health, so again, I don't want to quote how many hours the people are missing out on, but if you up it from 5 to 6 hours of sleep to the proper 8.5 hours, 9 hours, whatever it is you need, you'll have the testosterone levels of someone 10 years younger than you, which is quite enticing. And
I need to get working on that then, don't I?
We all do. But and also that in terms of over in the UK at least, we lose an hour of sleep once a year, and then we gain an hour of sleep, 6 months later. Yeah. So when we lose an hour of sleep, apparently the NHS, our National Health Service, all the ambulances are on standby because heart attacks are up. It's like 20% the next day. Yeah. And then funnily enough, we get an extra hour in bed, 20% down. Yeah. And it's just, you can't make that stuff up. It's absolutely mental. Check out Matthew Walker and some of his stats, for the accurate evidence. But when you start learning things like that, you're like, wow, this really is a bit of a game changer, sleep.
There's a really well-known horrendous accident that happened in the UK, which was a guy who was driving along, actually a motorway that you've driven along this morning, the M62.
Yeah.
And he was in a Land Rover and he fell asleep and he went down an embankment and ended up on a train track, and a train hit his car and derailed, and it killed multiple people. Yeah. And again, that's directly attributable to sleep again, isn't it? So
it's huge.
Yeah.
It really is. And if nothing else, it affects the way you can sort of like manage your emotions, your hormone, your testosterone levels, all of that. Cortisol, there's so many benefits to getting a good night's sleep. Yeah.
I'm getting very conscious of the time here, Ed, because we've had a fantastic chat, and I had some ideas here, and we've kind of just gone all over the place, but it's been great. One thing I did want to touch on, and I know you've kind of touched on it, is we've talked recently, haven't we, Langdon? We've talked about how we change training, how we make training an effective thing in business, an effective thing within health and safety. And one of the things that we're passionate of talking about is coaching. Yeah. So actually training in itself is not always effective. Yeah. It's actually that, how do we reinforce stuff and make it happen? Yeah. And I'm just really interested from your perspective as a sportsman, who were the best coaches and what was it that they did that stood them out?
Yeah, I think one thing we've sort of touched on already, having a clarity of clarity. Yeah. Clarity of like the goal, and like even like our coach, as in the fellow that sort of trained you up, if he had an understanding of how different pieces of the puzzle all sort of like connected together, having an understanding of different departments within the sort of your setup, and making that little synergies, you know what I mean? So you're not competing against the commercial team, for time, for example. Yeah. They're working together to try and make it work so that you can do bits and bobs on your rest day, and then they're happy, then they're not on your back. So someone that has, you've got clarity of like where you're going. Yeah. They have an understanding of how the slightly bigger picture's working around you and all the interconnected parts. Someone with, I believe that official terms like psychological safety. Yep. you feel like you can be honest and open without fears of consequence and repercussion. Psychological safety. There's nothing worse. Nothing worse than like sitting down and debriefing a team pursuit effort or whatever it is. And, all the riders are like, this was shit, we didn't get that right, or why did we do that, or I didn't feel so good today. And then you sit down in front of the coach, and the rider or the riders won't say, you know what, boys, I'm having a shit day, or I cocked that up. But they won't say, you know what, I cocked that up, or I'm having a shit day, because they're scared of the repercussions of being outed or being like questioned.
And again, we talk about that all the time with safety. Actually, if people are scared to talk, they don't tell you stuff, do they? Like that.
Yeah. So someone that can sort of like harvest an atmosphere and a culture of appreciating honesty and openness and things like that. Fun as well. I like that. Might be a personal preference, but I like leaders or coaches that add a bit of obviously like. When you're in a position of leadership, you've got to be professional, haven't you? 9 times out of 10, and say the right things and not have too much banter. And you've got to be seen as a position of leadership and authority and all that. But if now and again they can throw in a bit of jokes, a bit of banter, and sports hard, business is hard, life's hard. Someone that can just do a little bit even there to sort of like lift the tension, make you feel like everything's going to be all right. That's important too. Yeah. There's a few things there, wasn't there? Sort of clarity of goal. Having a bit of an understanding about the bigger picture, psychological safety, and the last thing I've just mentioned, which I forgot. Fun. Yeah.
Fun. I love the psychological safety bit. I'm going to steal that one with abandon. So, I've got one more question. Then I think it's only fair to let you tell us just briefly what you're doing now, Ed.
Yeah.
My final question is, because this is something everybody sort of imagines. Yeah. I've seen you cycling around the top of the velodrome with the Union Jack round your back. How does that feel? How does it feel when you're standing on that top step and the anthem's playing?
Yeah, I can't describe it. There's no words for it. I don't care who you are, what you do, how much money you make, what private jet you fly around on. There's nothing that makes you feel that high. Yeah. I don't think there's a drug you can inject in your arm that makes you feel that good. It's like you've got to go from a place of like sitting there and thinking about this 4 minutes that could, in some ways it's going to decide whether at least the cycling part of your life's been successful for the last 4 years or not. And when you get it right and the stars align, which didn't happen a lot, to be fair, felt better than anything I could ever feel. Like to stand up there with 3, I was always lucky that I got on with my pals and the coaches, and to stand up there with 3 of your best mates, nothing had come close and nothing's come close since. And the flip of that is when you don't get it right, it don't feel too good either.
But like you said, life's hard, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think there's a beauty in the struggle that you don't see until it's all over. Yep. And it's probably fair to say there's a bit of, the success isn't always as pretty as it seems as well. Yep. So,
Cool. And what you're doing now, Ed, we talked earlier about how it must be quite hard actually as a professional athlete coming to the end of that career.
Yeah.
What you're out there doing now, because I think again that kind of relates back to our world and how you can help people.
Yeah, so in terms of how retirement felt, and that, a lot's been said in the press, and there's loads of well-documented struggles from Olympians, footballers, sports people, left, right, and centre that struggle to come to terms with the afterlife. And for sure, it was really difficult actually, like early on. And I was really lucky. I had great support from British Cycling, and my agents always had my back. There's a few people that really sort of looked out for me and made the transition as easy as possible. And but even with all my sort of first world problems, it's bizarre getting your head around it. It's like it sounds.
I suppose
it must identity and like this weird thing this weird little niche thing that you did that you mentioned. I'm your hero for riding a bike around a track in a skin suit. It is bizarre, but there's a lot of people within the velodrome that look up to you because of that. And then all of a sudden, it's probably still the thing that you can do best in life, but it has no worth to you anymore. And you've almost got to like get off that ladder and start climbing a different one. from step one, and so that's how it feels. But right now I feel good.
Yeah,
But we're getting there. I've got so to answer your question in terms of what am I doing, I've got a contract with British Cycling, so I work with their research and innovation team developing skin suits, bikes for the current riders.
So you're coming up the 1%?
Yeah, well, I'm trying my best, and I still do the test riding job, which is great because I actually enjoy riding the bikes these days. I do a bit with the commercial team of British Cycling. I still work with my sports agent, so I do a bit of corporate speaking, public speaking, things like that, brand ambassador work. I'm doing a bit of work actually with CAMS, Cycle Accident Management Services. I've just come back from Tenerife, more for a team building exercise last week for that. But I have got a passion in terms of cycle safety and helping people get back on the bike because, unfortunately, everyone knows someone that's been injured, out there on the roads. Yeah. And the other thing I do is I work with a performance consultancy business called Pro Noctis, and I've got my own brand within that called Pursuit Line now, and really that's kind of we've kind of spoke a lot about it today, and it's obviously something I've got an interest in, but it's marrying up like the high performance principles that I've taken from sport and partnering that up with an established performance consultancy business that goes into the workplace and tries to develop management leadership roles, boardroom advice, things like that, and train up the workforce.
So we talked earlier about Cav and Cav and his supreme confidence. I think I'm more in the normal camp, which is that of sort of suffering from imposter syndrome. And you sit there thinking, how on earth am I doing this? And I'm sat here today thinking, how on earth am I sitting here talking to Ed Clancy about safety? But Ed, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much.
So thank you very much.
Cheers.
Langdon, any final words from you?
No, we just definitely appreciate your time, Ed. It's awesome to hear the applicability of the changes that y'all were able to make in the British cycling team, and just especially because it's the same thing. I mean, as you've heard about what we try to say, it's picking out the little pieces of how you can constantly improve. So very much appreciate your time and being able to glean some of that knowledge and insights. It's definitely invaluable.
Cheers, Langdon. Cheers. Thanks, Langdon. Hope it was helpful. Thanks, mate.
For sure. Virtual shake. I appreciate your time.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Thanks.
But for everyone, thanks for joining in to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. This time we had two bald guys and one guy with hair. So next time, if Ed joins us, he will be shaved for this podcast. So we appreciate everyone joining in. Everyone, really appreciate you tuning into this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Please follow and subscribe to wherever you stream your favorite podcast, or visit us at evotix.com.
And if you want to see how follically challenged we really are, come and check us out on YouTube. If you've got value from the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, and in the review section of this podcast, if you could leave us a review or a rating, that would be great.
And as always, everyone, while you're going about your days, about your normal lives, stay safe out there and watch each other's back.